Welcome into another PFF Draft Short. I'm Steve Palazzolo along with Josh Liskowitz. Today discussing Ohio State safety Malik Hooker. Now, Josh, this guy's been getting top 10 hype, just like some of the others, a couple other safeties. So I think this is a draft that's loaded in safeties, loaded in cornerbacks. And the thing I keep saying is you can get any type of corner, any type of safety that you're looking for in this draft. And I think when you talk about Malik Hooker, the first thing you discuss is that center field ability, that ability to play with range on the back end. And it looks like he might be the best safety to come out in that respect in quite some time.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, Steve. At the beginning of the season, first two games, Bowling Green and Tulsa, he made just fantastic interceptions. I think he had 3 between those two, and they were absolute highlight reel plays. The first one,
they were incredible, one-handed and everything.
Well, it wasn't even just the fact that it was one-handed. It was the fact that he's on the opposite hash, tracks it 40 yards downfield, and then high points it one-handed in front of both the corner and the receiver. Just phenomenal play to really start his career, because really he didn't have playing time to speak of before that at Ohio State.
Just a redshirt sophomore, I believe.
That's right.
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah, so, I mean, immediately you saw his full skill set right there in terms of his range and ball skills.
Yeah, and then my favorite one, I think, was the Deshaun Watson interception in the playoffs. And I remember back, we're grading every single player on every play, and I'm looking at this Watson pass, and I'm thinking, this isn't even a bad pass by Watson. All it was, there was single coverage on the outside. Watson throws the go route. He overthrows the receiver a little bit. It wasn't an egregious pass. It wasn't one where you said, Watson, that's a bad decision. It was just Hooker came from the opposite hash, same thing, read the play immediately, sprints over there, unbelievable angle to the ball, and then finishes it with the interception too, which I think is just as important. It's one thing to take the right angle, to read the play, to get a jump on the ball, but then finish the play, keep your feet in bounds, and create the turnover. So, I joke every year, like, find me a free safety. We were the last couple of years evaluating the draft. There were not a whole lot of pure free safeties, and anytime a guy made a play on the ball, we were going nuts. Like, wow, maybe this is the guy. Hooker did it over and over and over again. So he has those skills, and anytime you say he's a great center fielder or has those ball skills, immediately who comes to mind? Is it Ed Reed? Is it Earl Thomas? Perhaps that's a little unfair, to put him into that boat, but that's the type of player that we're talking about. You wrote the profile for him on the site. Who'd you use as a comparison? Because I think it was more fair, but it also captured the fact that Hooker is really good on the back end.
Yeah, I used Reggie Nelson, who obviously he started off with Cincinnati. Currently, he is in Oakland. But it's just a guy that's an absolute ball hawk. He makes plays from way off the ball. He finishes, as you said. That's important, too, because obviously it's a big difference between
forcing turnovers, man.
Well,
it's all about those turnovers.
Well, and also, too, when you're a free safety and forcing those turnovers, you have a lot of space to operate in. This isn't, the Mike linebacker just getting a tip over the middle.
Right.
This is a guy that has space to move. He has elite speed, and he can do something with the ball after it. So the fact that he's finishing, that's huge in that respect as well. Again, saw that in week 2. Tulsa actually played them real tight the first half, and then all of a sudden, it's like with 2 minutes to go in the half, he baits the quarterback, picks it off, returns it for a touchdown, and the game was essentially over.
That's changing the game right there,
Yep.
Absolutely. So the thing about Hooker, before we get into some of his negatives, because he has some negatives to his game, he's coming into the league at the right time where, we always talk about the Seattle Seahawks scheme. They play single high all the time. Earl Thomas makes it tick as the free safety so they can play cover 1, cover 3. Seattle now has their tentacles or their former coaches all over the league. So now you see the Jacksonville Jaguars, the LA Chargers, the San Francisco 49ers, the Atlanta Falcons, all running a similar scheme where they want that true center field safety, and then they want the Cam Chancellor type in the box, a true strong safety. So Atlanta, they did it last year with Keanu O'Neal playing the Cam Chancellor role, Ricardo Allen playing the free safety role. Jacksonville has gotten to Sean Gibson to play that free safety role, Barry Church more of that strong safety role. I think those guys will be a little bit more interchangeable, but I think Hooker's coming into the league at the right time, or now the 49ers running that scheme. The Chargers, they're the team I keep pairing with Hooker in mock drafts at 7 overall. That just seems like a perfect fit. Gus Bradley comes over from Jacksonville to run that defense. Is that where Hooker ultimately lands? Is it the Chargers at 7? Is that just that perfect fit for him where he gets to use those center field skills?
I think it really is. Leading off the podcast, you talked about how tough it's been in recent years to find that free safety that can range, that can cover the middle of the field, that center fielder. Those guys just rarely exist, and we happen to have a couple of them this year, but he's certainly towards the top of that. I really like that fit for the Chargers.
All right, let's talk about the negatives for Hooker. What about his tackling? It was pretty poor. I mean, he missed 1 out of every 6.5 tackle attempts. That was one of the worst rates in the entire nation. What do we have? 135th among the top 242 qualifying safeties. What do you see from his tackling that is so concerning?
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. Quite honestly, there are a lot of times where you look at him and he kind of looks like one of those Wii characters where he just has the nub arms.
Oh, jeez.
That might be a little bit harsh.
Mike Renner and I are making up scouting terms once a week on the podcast. His nub arms, has that been used yet? That's not common, right?
I don't think so.
So we can make that term. We can make up some other new terms if you need to describe.
I think we just invented that
to describe Hooker's tackling.
But and it's not just his poor tackling. He just, you could see the mental process he goes to when he's covering on the back end is very different than when he's up in the box trying to defend the run. He takes bad angles. He runs himself out of gaps. He just puts himself in bad position, and then he ends up panicking, diving, whiffing. And obviously, when you're the free safety and you're missing tackles, that's a problem.
Yeah, so that's an issue. And look, we've maybe graded Earl Thomas a little bit lower than I know all Seattle fans expect him to be. But in part, it's because of he's had a lot of missed tackles through the years. But the defense of Earl Thomas is he gets to more plays than someone else, and I think that's fair to a point. Earl Thomas is like that missile coming in from the secondary. A lot of times, it's just him throwing his body around, and a missed tackle, so to speak, is not the worst thing in the world if he's playing to his leverage and all that stuff. With Hooker, I think it's more concerning because there's a lot of times he's the last line of defense,
right,
in missing tackles because he's a poor tackler. I wouldn't call Earl Thomas a poor tackler. I think sometimes he goes for the big hit instead of wrapping up. And again, this is why I think maybe the Reggie Nelson comparison is a little bit cleaner. And this is more like late career Reggie Nelson, because I think early in his career, he was kind of that downhill strong safety that actually wanted to take your head off. Does Hooker have any of that pop or power when he tackles, or is he just wrap up, just finish the play, and oh, by the way, he does actually, leave too many on the table?
Yeah, see, I don't see that power at all for him. Like you said, I don't see him coming downhill. He's not Troy Polamalu coming up way out of control.
Right.
He's not doing any of that. And like you said, it's perfect with Earl Thomas. When he misses a tackle at 5 yards off the line of scrimmage, but it forces the runner to cut back into the defense, that's acceptable. Right. Because he potentially could have made a big play, whether he's jarring a ball loose or just making a stop. But he's also giving the rest of his defense a chance to recover. Right. But with Hooker, if he's sitting back waiting and then taking a bad angle on a guy that's already got the edge, that's a much bigger problem. We saw that against, I think, Penn State. I think Barkley ripped off at least one big one on him because of him doing just that.
Yeah, so that part's a big concern with Hooker. So I think the biggest thing is putting him in the right scheme, letting him play. And even if he doesn't land in one of those teams that loves to play a true center field role, if he's playing split safety coverages and two high coverages, he's going to be a playmaker there as well. I just think to maximize his ability, putting him in the right scheme, keeping him away from the box, letting him play free safety, and then hopefully you tie up some of that tackling. It was just his first real year of action with Ohio State. So ultimately, where do you like him as far as an evaluation goes? I still see him as a top 10 player. I think you were probably a little bit lower on him when you went through him. I think the scheme dictates it, though. If you're talking that all-around safety, that lowers him. If you put him in the right system, I think he's a top 10 player with the right team.
Yeah, I agree with that. Scheme definitely dictates part of that. Also, I think there might be a couple other safeties that just have a little bit more versatility. Certainly Jamal Adams, we've talked about him being way up there. And my guy, I know this isn't going to be a popular opinion, but Obi Melifonwu, I think you see some ability to play free safety with him, but you see him in the box as well.
You do it all, yeah.
Yeah, and the reality is, when you're in the box, you're affecting more plays.
Right.
So just by the nature of that, if you have a player that can do both, like an Obi, then it makes more sense in my mind to take him a little bit higher. I still like Hooker somewhere in the teens, but scheme-wise, I would totally understand it, and I wouldn't argue if a team, like you mentioned, like the Chargers, took him at 7 overall. I definitely understand that. And I also think one of the great things about this class, we don't have to go into too much depth with this, but there are so many good ones that if you don't have anything back there, you can get him and then get a guy that you feel more comfortable in the box later in the draft on day 2. That's very, very easy to do because this class is so deep. So ultimately, who knows with him? The tackling could be such an issue with teams that 3 or 4 safeties go in front of him. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a better player than them, though.
Right, and I think that's the big thing with Hooker is is definitely the scheme fit. I think for our sake, I just want to see him in that center field role. I want to see that. Be the case, and I do think scheme will absolutely dictate where he goes, but I would not be surprised to see him as a top 10 pick going to the right team. So there you have it. That's Malik Hooker from Ohio State, currently in the top 10 on our draft board.